KPCA, LP, Petaluma, California. Isn't that a chipper piece of music?
It's like a wood chipper. That's the kind of chipper it is. Hi, Matt.
Yeah, hi, Jim. Well, no, it's a really nice kind of upbeat little happy tune, but then, that's kind of ironic because, of course, this is two Mooks and a mic.
Our last one. Our
very last show. This is an historic moment, folks.
It's an historic moment.
It's true. Right. The Mooks are going to hang up their mic.
Yeah, we're going to go on assignment.
Wander off into the
sunset. Yeah. Yes, and this time we'll pull our pants up. I mean, my God, I hate walking around with my pants down by my ankles.
Yeah.
You can't run very fast.
Yeah, I don't know what they were doing there, and we don't want to go there.
We don't want to go there. No,
exactly.
We don't. Anyway, it's Friday. Welcome to our last show,
folks,
everybody.
thanks for tuning in to Two Mooks and a Mic. This is our last show. We've been at it a couple of years.
Has it been 2 years?
Well, it has been for me.
Oh, yeah.
More than 2 years.
So me, it seems like just yesterday, man.
Yeah, it's been a good run. I started with John Crowley. We had a couple other people in here, and
one of the
back
two Micks.
When we were two Micks and a Mic.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, we couldn't do that because I'm not Irish.
No.
So there we go.
Yeah, not even Celtic, so...
Well,
there you
Scottish,
go.
Is that Celtic?
Well, it's a bit, but not enough. We had your blood tested.
Yeah, that's right. You had to have the right DNA to be a Mook.
23andMe, it just didn't work.
23andMe.
Yeah, that's right. So now it's two Mooks. But this is it, folks.
Yeah,
we want to thank, Donna and Slotcart Bob and, Susie and, of course, Larry and people who have been dedicated listeners.
Thank you. And KPCA.
And we have to
shout out
thank
to these
KPCA.
guys. Because they're the only ones that would let us speak in some sort of a form, and then they throw us in the room, and we're not wild.
And they never chased us away.
They didn't. They kept us off the streets.
We are not being forced out.
No, this is a voluntary thing, everybody. It's voluntary early retirement.
But for all you political junkies, there plenty happened this week, of course.
Yeah, here we go.
This is... we saw that the Supreme Court made a couple of really important decisions. One of them was that the right-wing zealous majority said, gerrymandering, we can't touch that. Yeah. There's nothing in the Constitution that says, you, Supreme Court, fix that problem. Well, of course, what they did then is they're going to open the floodgates for gerrymandering everywhere in the 2020 election. And that means that, there's going to be people who are going to be deprived of their voting rights.
That's correct. Yeah, but the thing is, Matt, about that is that the only glimmer of hope that I could see, and I always try to look for a glimmer of hope so I won't slit my wrists and hide all the sharp instruments and weapons in my home. The only glimmer of hope is that it's up to the states to decide. Now, the blue states could gerrymander like crazy and make sure that they have a majority forever, but it's not going to help the red states.
Well, and here's the problem. There's 22 states in the country that have Republican state houses and governors.
All right.
There's only, I think it's 14 Democratic state house governor combinations, so there's a huge disproportion. And of course, I think it was Maryland, I think North Carolina, where these suits were brought to the Supreme Court. And it was North Carolina where the Republicans won 46% of the vote, and they won 64% of the seats.
That's right.
Now that's just so out of control, and of course, I think it was Elena Kagan who
she did a scathing argument against it.
Yes.
Of course, she was in the minority on the Supreme Court.
Right. And what Robert said was, he said, we conclude that partisan gerrymandering claims present political questions beyond the reach of the federal courts. Now, that is just a bunch of horse crap if there ever was.
It's bullpucky.
I mean, they are always, the right-wingers are always, fomenting against activist judges. And
that's right.
Here he can look like he's not an activist, but this is very much an activist
being an
judge.
activist ruling.
Exactly.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. And so...
what's the hope, Matt, besides my little glimmer of hope that the states can control it?
That's about it. So we saw in the midterm elections that a lot of the state houses did, the numbers have gotten better in 2018. They did have, more Republican state houses and they lost some.
Yeah.
So what that means is people have to get out there and be active in their politics.
Yeah.
Because really what Kagan said, she says, quote, "The only way to understand the majority's opinion is as follows. In the face of grievous harm to democratic governance and the flagrant infringements on individual rights, in the face of escalating partisan manipulation whose compatibility with this nation's values and law no one defends, the majority declines to provide any remedy. For the first time in this nation's history, the majority declares that it can do nothing about an acknowledged constitutional violation because it has searched high and low and cannot find a workable legal standard to apply."
That's so bullpucky-ish.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is just an outrage of the first water.
That's not cool.
And it's going to have a huge negative impact. Now, the other decision the Supreme Court made, though, was on the question of whether or not the Trump administration can add a question on the 2020 census,
That's right, the census,
asking of your citizenship status. And the court said they didn't say no. They didn't ban the question. What they said was, it's clear that the reason the government gave for wanting to put that on there was a lie.
Yeah.
And the reason they gave was, well, that supposedly, the Department of Justice wanted this to help enforce the Voting Rights Act. Now, that's just preposterous on the face of it, because the Trump administration has never filed a lawsuit to protect people's voting rights under the act. They've done everything they can to undercut it.
Right. So Trump officials could cook up a new excuse and go back to court. Remember how they kept changing the Muslim ban until they came up with a version the Supreme Court upheld. But the Constitution says the census must happen every 10 years, so there's likely not enough time for them to take another bite at the apple.
Right, because it's like a $15 billion effort, and it takes a lot of planning.
To print it
and the Constitution says it must be done in May of 2020. Mm-hmm. And typically these kinds of questions are vetted over a period of 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And this has had none, of course. Now, the fact that the court said that gerrymandering is perfectly okay if for the rank political struggle to maintain power, if that's your motivation, well, we can't do anything about it. So they could apply the same logic. The Trump administration could come back and say, well, okay, we'll tell you the truth. We really want to do this question because we think it's better to have Republicans in control rather than Democrats, and this will help us maintain control. In which case, this court is very likely to say, okay.
You said the truth, and that's what we asked for, as bad as it is.
Yeah.
So this whole thing about the gerrymandering, how did they do it in the worst possible way? The argument against these gerrymanders was that by penalizing people based on their political affiliation, they violate citizens' free speech rights.
Right.
The court didn't just disagree, but ruled that disputes over gerrymandering can't be settled in federal court at all. So now what? Great question. The ruling means your engagement in politics is more important than ever. Federal courts literally can't solve this problem anymore. Some state courts might help, but most of these gerrymanders aren't going to anywhere unless you vote for new state legislatures who will change these maps. For new members of Congress who will support legislation prohibiting partisan gerrymandering, and for ballot initiatives that seek to take redistricting out of partisan hands. Wow. Here's a web address for where you can start. http://
www, whatever.
Thank you. go.crooked.com/Jerry, Gerry. So it's go.crooked.com, Gerry.
/Gerry.
Yes, /Gerry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there is some good news. The court's 4 liberals and Chief Justice John Roberts also ruled that the Trump administration's rationale for putting a citizenship question on the 2020 census was a lie. That's what we just talked about.
Yes.
So that's the only thing. It's not having anything to do with gerrymandering. So the court did a horrible thing with gerrymandering and a potentially good thing with the citizenship question.
And with the citizenship question, it goes back to the federal district court in New York, and there's a new lawsuit that was filed because the Republican Party's chief strategist for gerrymandering recently died, and a stash of thumb drives and hard drives was found by his estranged daughter, who had all those documentation that said, no, we want to do this because this gerrymandering will help Republicans and non-Hispanic whites, quote unquote. So it's obviously a racist and power-motivated move. And so that case is still continuing. So the Supreme Court is typically not going to act until that has been litigated to completion. And I'm sure that New York District Court is going to find that, once again, the Trump administration finds that, Mnuchin and these guys just lied through their teeth.
Yeah, of course they did. So, Matt, one of the things that, and you and I were talking earlier about watching the debates last night, and we're trying to figure out, I remember hearing, and I think you did too, one of the potential candidates for the presidency, he suggested, or maybe it was a she, I think it was a he, suggested that they can actually change the Supreme Court structure by, of course, adding more on the Supreme Court, but also they can rotate the judges out, not because they're appointed for life. You can't not make them a judge, but you can roll them off of the Supreme Court and put them onto a circuit court.
Yeah, that was an interesting comment, that I'm not familiar with the background on, but we do know this. You would have to get the Senate to go along with that because they have the authority to nominate and appoint judges and things, or to not nominate, but appoint them.
Right, to appoint
and so
them.
this is, once again, goes right back to the gerrymandering. It's like, okay, so we're going to have to, really, people are going to have to work to really elect more honest people.
That's right. Now, so what happens in a gerrymandering if a Democratic district overwhelmingly votes for Democrats? Can they still lose?
Well, no. It's like the election, the race is based on the vote tally, but the districts and how they are structured are jiggered, and they've got, the Republicans are masters at this, and there's all kinds of software
that helps
helps you figure out, okay, if we pull this neighborhood into the district and keep that one out, that gives us preponderance. Basically what they do is they cram as many Democrats into tight little districts, and then and have a majority in a much larger geographic area.
Right. That's why they look like just spaghetti thrown on the wall
exactly.
as far as the districts go.
Yeah.
So Mitch McConnell, Matt, back to the Supreme Court. He is already planning to block future Democratic Supreme Court nominees. He's making up his own rules on the Supreme Court nominations. He has no constitutional basis for the things that are coming out this month. The Senate Majority Leader is inventing imaginary rules to give himself the ability to block future Democratic Supreme Court nominees outside of the president's first year of office. So in other words, what he's saying is the Democratic president must nominate a Supreme Court nominee within his first year of office. But he changed it because Barack Obama, remember, couldn't nominate a Supreme Court justice until in the last term. He couldn't even do it in his last term.
Right.
He wanted the people to decide.
He was stymied by McConnell.
That's right. But future Democratic president will have just 1 year window to get the Supreme Court nominee confirmed.
And you could see Trump signing a law like that.
Oh, of course, and the Republicans. There's no rules for the Republicans.
But it is not going to make it through the House. So there's right now no chance that it will survive as litigation.
Now. So we have to make sure that the next elections in 2020, the House stays blue,
right,
and hopefully the Senate will.
Got to turn that Senate blue and get the White
that?
House back. Yeah,
a dream come true.
Well, there's so much damage, and they've laid down so many markers here that it's going to take. Well, as we've seen, the House has now spent a year
trying to undo things.
Yeah, a year and a half trying to undo things.
Right.
I guess it's not been a year and a half, but there's so much stuff that they have to work on.
Since the blue tsunami happened.
Yes, exactly. I mean, one of the nice things to see is that Robert Mueller is going to testify before both the House Judiciary and the House.
And I think it's going to be an open
House Intelligence Committee.
That's it.
One after the other. And I believe it is going to be open to the public.
And that's good. So they want to ask him some questions.
Now remember, though, the guy is an ex-head of the FBI. Now he's got the sterling reputation, blah, blah, blah.
He's not your hero.
But he was a prosecutor, and he also really declined to really, call a spade, right?
Yeah, and also they said that he was reluctant to testify because he said, I said it all in my report.
Yeah.
So coming back, he might be really reluctant to say anything more.
Now, I want to jump back for a second because you'd mentioned the Democratic debate. So we watched that both nights. Very interesting.
Yeah.
10 candidates per night, which is unwieldy.
That's unwieldy.
In the extreme. They were 90 minutes, so you had an average of 9 minutes. Now, they certainly focused on certain candidates on each night who got more time than others.
Yeah, and Chuck Todd gets more and more criticism for what he's doing. Talks more than some of the candidates even.
Yeah.
And doing the got you questions. He tries to do the got
right,
you
and
questions.
it's like, yes or no, raise your hand. Well, that's great. It gives you an indicator, but he's asking very heavyweight questions that have a lot of nuance, such as,
questions.
what do you do about automatic weapons? Does the government buy them back? Do you take them away? Here's saying, do you support taking them away? Yes or no?
Away,
It's like,
right.
That's just inane.
You can't do
right?
that. And
but here's what I came away from those debates with, and that is that every single one of those candidates, even the most conservative and fringe member of them, were so much more talented than any of the Republican candidates in the presidential primary, the Republican primary.
Thank you.
Those are a bunch of vacuous, flag-waving pseudo-patriots that was cut taxes and that'll create more jobs and everybody will be happy while they're busy gerrymandering and inflicting racist prohibitions on, vast swaths of the voters.
Right. And they didn't know what they were doing. Remember Rick Perry, who couldn't name the three
departments
that he was going to eliminate.
He would eliminate,
Yeah, or
Ben
Carson. Yes, thank you.
Just like completely nitwits, morons.
He is a nitwit,
and every one of these
brain surgeon.
What was interesting in this debate, there was a lot of crosstalk, just like in Two Mooks,
which is good, right?
It is because a lot of information gets transmitted that way, and it gets transmitted in a way that is more than just a rehearsed soundbite, right?
Yes.
So people, make a charge, respond. And in yesterday's debate, Kamala Harris was basically attacking Joe Biden because he had voted against desegregation through school busing.
That's right.
She actually was, I was interested to learn, was a beneficiary of early busing in the desegregation of Berkeley city schools.
That little girl was me.
That's right.
And you can actually buy a T-shirt with her picture on it saying that little girl was me now. Yeah, pretty cool.
Well, and so Biden was like, I was against, the federal government imposing, the busing on local city councils. And she's going, local city councils, she didn't say as many words, but like in Alabama, where they will never integrate schools. And that is where the federal government has had to step in. And so Biden really, walked away with egg on his face on that one.
I don't know why he's afraid of busing, because Kamala Harris threw him under one. Maybe that is why he is afraid. Yeah, and then there's Marianne Williamson, Matt. Marianne Williamson.
She's interesting, isn't she?
She's really interesting.
I like it that she's there.
A tweet has come up about her, and this is what she said. When it's time for a chicken to hatch, the eggshell fills with a noxious gas, causing the chicken to start pecking. The baby is literally dying to be born. We, too, are dying to be born into a greater expression of ourselves. The spot we're now at, having become an uninhabitable place.
Well, good for her. She's right.
Yeah, the only gas I smell is, we won't talk about that. It's the digestion from last night.
No, it's emanating from the White House and the Senate.
Well, she's right, Matt, but come on. I thought she was a breath of fresh air. I really did. But she's like, as my sister writes and says, has she been eating like pot or something?
Yeah.
What's she ingesting?
I mean, and she's an author, and she has a
self-help book,
spiritual focus to life, and that's all good. I mean, we could certainly benefit from more of that.
But going up against Trump?
But I honestly, Jim, she doesn't have a snowflake's chance in hell.
I agree.
But I'm glad she's there because she is a refreshing viewpoint and vantage point. And that was one of the great things about these debates.
Yeah, what?
It wasn't just the same, like the Republicans, uniform, cut taxes, barricade the border.
That we all hear
and all
over
that
and over again. The platitudes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we all know.
Which are all lies to start with, right? Mm-hmm. These were people who knew how government works. They had got their fingers down into it. We got a couple of senators, you got Kamala Harris, you've got Gillibrand, you've got Klobuchar, you've got
Biden.
And you've got ex-governors and
That's
stuff.
That's right. Buttigieg.
Hickenlooper.
That's right.
All kinds of stuff.
So they've had a lot of experience.
And they have interesting vantage points, and they had good ideas. Even, Tim Ryan, who's a guy I never really cared for, a congressman from Ohio, pretty conservative Democrat. But, when he made his case, he really was cogent, had thought things through, and had some persuasive arguments.
It was a pretty exciting debate. I have to tell you, too, one of the moments for me that was really telling was Pete Buttigieg, as you know, back in Ohio. There was a policeman who shot a white policeman who shot a black man.
Yeah, that's right.
He did not have his camera on.
That's right.
And Pete Buttigieg, when called on this, he basically said, I messed up.
Yeah.
It was a mistake.
Yeah.
And Wow, a humble guy.
And Eric Swalwell, who's a congressman from Southern California.
That's right, yeah.
And his primary issue is getting rid of assault weapons and gun control, and God bless him for that.
Yeah.
He actually challenged Buttigieg and said, the cop had his camera off, fire the chief.
Fire him. Fire the chief. Fire the cop, too. Fire them both.
And I thought that was great to hear that. You know,
Me
it's
too.
like, you know, you don't have your camera on and you shoot somebody, you are automatically out of it.
Absolutely.
That's the way it should be all across the country.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. And Buttigieg he has been a soldier, and he knows about assault weapons, and he also
as he said, he trained on them.
Right, trained on them. He also has no space for a place for them in public.
That's right. And he was really, really grounded and well spoken.
I thought so
Just
too.
like the night before when Julian Castro and Cory Booker were both really impressive with what they had to say and their observations and their suggested answers. These are people who aren't just like going, hey, I'm a pretty face, you know,
or
trust me.
Suit. Right.
Yeah. They're going, here's what we can do about these things. Now, if we don't, if the whole electoral process is not just completely corrupted by this Supreme Court ruling on gerrymandering, then, you know, there's hope for us as a country, as a society.
Yeah.
And if that gerrymandering does inflict and prevent somebody of those caliber from getting elected, we're hosed for good. You know?
Then it's time to renew your passport and think about where you're going to live.
Yeah,
but you know what, Matt? I in thinking about this, all these candidates are so strong, and it was very exciting for me to hear what they were saying.
Yeah.
And some of the things really resonated, some didn't so much, but even so, any of them would have been better than Trump.
Absolutely.
My feeling is whoever finally gets the nomination, I think all those other people who were up there would be excellent cabinet
members.
Or to turn back and run for the Senate, for God's sakes.
Absolutely. I agree, Jim. I mean, that's a really strong stable there for
very strong.
You know, improving the quality of governance in this country.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's true. Biden didn't do so well. You know, the attack from Kamala Harris and some of his, you know, I mean, you know, he sounded a little defensive. Yeah, he's been around a long time. He's a world-class schmoozer.
Yeah.
But, you know, if it's Biden, I'll vote for him, you know.
I would, sure.
If it's Marianne Williamson, I'll vote for her.
Of course, anybody but Trump, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is from, let's see, it's from Politicus USA, and it says who won and who lost. They talk about winners being Joe Biden. They said he had one mission during the first Democratic debate.
Don't screw it up.
He was out to show that he is the only Democratic candidate who can defeat Donald Trump. He was pressed hard by Kamala Harris, and he withstood it all. I am not sure he did.
I'm not sure he did either. And in fact, Bernie Sanders made the good point. He said, hey, you know, in a lineup today, me versus Trump, I'm 10 points ahead.
That's right. He is. That's correct.
But, of course, I think the polling shows that pretty much any of the main Democratic candidates are ahead of Trump.
They are. And I saw that, too. But Bernie is the farthest ahead.
Yeah, that's right.
At the time that poll was taken, which is a snapshot.
And I love Bernie. I support Bernie. I support Elizabeth Warren. You know, but if either of those are not in the top, you know, there's a lot of other good people there. I was a little disappointed. You know, Bernie is a consistent, true, blue, real patriot American.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's pretty old, and, you know, he looks it because he's a little hunched over, you know.
Well, he's always been hunched over.
Yeah, he has. But so, you know, he didn't quite have the scintillating energy that, say, a Cory Booker had. On the other hand, Elizabeth Warren came across pretty sharp.
She sure did. Here's what they say about Bernie Sanders. He said he has a bit of the same problem as Trump, as he is trying to replay the 2016 election when the country has changed heading into 2020.
There's a bit of that.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
He's passionate. He's very passionate about what he talks about.
As he points out, much of what every one of those Democratic candidates is saying, the positions they're taking are the positions he has had in that last election, and now he has made those legitimate.
So that's a good point. He was so out there last time and proposing these things.
He wasn't really, but the mainstream media.
That's what I mean by out there. That there are ideas that hadn't even been thought about, and he said this is what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And now people, in only a few years later, they're taking these positions.
That's right.
And they're furthering them. And
eliminating student debt, free college, Medicare for all.
Yes.
Or some form of that.
And it's become the status quo.
Yeah, and you know, treating people at the border humanely and letting that, you know, decriminalizing. Mm-hmm. This was a good question. It's like, who would decriminalize crossing the border? And on last night's show, they all raised their hand.
Yeah, they did, and and that was pretty exciting. I like that. I heard an interview with Andrew Yang. part of the Yang
Yeah.
gang, and his
Yang
his
gang.
idea. It says here he struggled to describe his signature issue, which is the universal basic income, that everybody over 18 gets $1,000.
Yeah, he
per
did not
year.
get a lot of time to elaborate on
He
that.
needed
but he
to do
was,
that.
But he was pretty clear in the moments he had.
Yes,
I
he
thought.
was. He has interesting thoughts, it says, but it was clear he didn't belong on the debate stage with the Democratic heavyweights. I disagree.
I disagree also.
I think that having a wide open and many ideas is a good thing.
Absolutely.
But I hate this thing called a debate. It's not a debate, man. It's kind of a free-for-all, and it's a stupid
Well,
answer the question thing.
Yeah, I mean, so, here's the thing. So I think there's two critical issues going forward from here. And one is voter rights, the Voting Rights Act being gutted, and gerrymandering, and voter suppression, and voter roll purging. That's a huge one. And the other one, of course, is the climate crisis,
Yes.
right? Now,
Yes, crisis.
again, the Democratic leadership has been resistant, at least in this debate, for all its unwieldiness, and it's automatically difficult when you got 24 people running. They did have a couple questions about the climate. They didn't do that 4 years ago. The DNC would not let the Democratic National Committee.
And why is that?
Because
Tom Perez.
Because the status quo, and who's given money, and the oil companies, and the whole corrupt aspect of the electoral process that we all see and hate. But so there was some mention of there. Now, there's many of us signing petitions and things saying we need to have a specific debate that focuses on the climate.
Yes,
right.
please, let's do that.
Because there's plenty to talk about there. And if you have 24 people giving their ideas, and they're the intelligent people we've seen, there's likely to be some really constructive discussion.
So
there.
what's next after this? There's going to be more debates, of course, but it's going to be winnowed down further and further. Is that the idea?
I think so, yeah. And
how are they going to decide who's
the
in
DNC, who's in large control of this, basically says, if you haven't raised X amount of money by, Y amount of time, then we're going to consider you a non-contender. If you don't poll with this much, percent support, we're going to consider you a non-contender. So that's typically how they do it.
Have you read anything about how Trump's reaction to any of this?
Oh, first they did, on Wednesdays he tweeted boring.
Yeah, that's right. But that's the first.
That's boring to you
thing.
because it's all over your head. You numbskull. You nitwit. You knuckle dragging
you pea-brain.
rapist.
You pinhead.
You sleazebag.
Yeah, rapist is a good.
Rapist is what he is.
Rapist in the White House.
Yeah, a guy who assaults women. I mean, the guy's just a scumbag.
Yeah.
And then I guess there was some tweets, from yesterday's debate. What did I read? Just that, he said, "I won."
What the hell does that mean? He won. What did he win?
Yeah.
He doesn't even know.
He doesn't know.
That's all he said. That's all he cares
the
about.
guy just spews filth.
I'm looking at some of the how these candidates did. Kristen Gillibrand, I was most disappointed with her. And this is from Slate, and it says she pushed her way into several discussions as if she were peeved not to be getting taken more seriously, something for which you can't really blame her, given that she set up this campaign for years, becoming one of the most prominent members of the Senate by taking forward-looking positions on a wide variety of subjects and consistently pushing her caution-inclined caucus to battle the Trump administration as aggressively as possible. Boy, that's a sentence.
Yeah, really.
Voters are just not that interested in what she's selling right now, and you have to feel bad for her, or at least as bad as it's possible to feel for a former attorney for Philip Morris, who specialized in disclosure issues related to the company's research into the health effects of smoking.
Oh,
wow. So that's interesting. But, I give credit for people who have changed.
Yeah.
The fact that she was working for Philip Morris and was being a sleazebag lawyer, you can change from that. Just like our reputation, Matt, we've become so much better for being too moved.
Has our reputation changed for the better, Jim?
I don't know. It's been tainted, but maybe it's got a little polish on that
Maybe
taint.
it's time for us to do a poll.
No, I don't think so.
All right, everybody out there that likes Two Mooks, raise your hand right now. Thank you.
I see a bunch of hands up.
All those who think we're scumbags, raise Yeah.
Not a single hand.
No,
I don't see a
not
single
one.
hand.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Appreciate it. All right.
With that vote of confidence, let's continue.
What about Tulsi Gabbard? What's up with her? She impressed the debate audience to the extent that she made a compelling case against the United United States' endless war, foreign policy, and has a compelling
As a veteran.
biography at first glance. Likely will not overcome the reality that her pacifism involves weird advocacy for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and that her biography involves ongoing connections to a small, not entirely healthy-seeming religious sect in Hawaii.
Yeah, and she, her presence, I mean, she's an attractive woman, but she looked a little glassy-eyed, little fixed smile on the face.
Yeah.
You just kind of felt that her true self was a little distant there.
I think so too. Yeah, she wasn't. It doesn't seem to be present.
Gillibrand was really pushy, and I don't think that's an offense in women, particularly not in public life. But she was. I think it was a bit on. It was a bit of a strong arm. On her part.
Whether it's a man or a woman, Matt, to me she became obnoxious because she wasn't letting other people talk.
Yeah,
and she was basically commandeering the microphone.
Yeah, that was it. Commandeering. That's a good word for it. And then the night before we saw Klobuchar, and she was, and again, these are women senators who are making some good cases and sound reasoning. But, the devil's in the details, and when push comes to shove, it's like, well, who threw Al Franken under the bus, when...
Go ahead.
For offenses that were minuscule.
He didn't touch any women?
Compared to
picture.
What the president has admitted doing.
And he's getting no blowback from that.
Exactly.
From the rape of this
woman.
woman.
In fact, there's, what's her name? E. Jean Carroll, who's an advice columnist, says back in, was it the late 90s or 80s? She was basically raped by Donald Trump in a dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman. And she told a couple of friends at the time who have corroborated her story. Yeah, and one of them said, well, don't go to the police, don't do anything. He's really rich and powerful. And the other one said, yeah, you should turn him in. But that's kind of what rape victims have to go through. They have to make a calculus of, am I safe here to report the crime?
I have no problem with women who do not report their rape or attempted rape years later, because think of the trauma, Matt. I mean, it must be absolutely horrendous and they need time to process that. And as you said, they have to feel safe to come forth with that. And I don't blame her at all. But the fact that she said that and it only made the front page of the newspaper of the Washington Post, everybody else was
ignored it,
except I think the Times put it on the fashion section because that's what her business was, right? She wrote for that magazine. Yeah, so there we go.
Yeah, well, there's always a little something positive bubbles up, and one of them is that the U.S. asylum officers, these are the people who, when people come to America and apply for asylum, do the initial review to see if they have a legitimate case. Yeah. Their union denounced Donald Trump's policy forcing asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while they, for their asylum court date.
Good for them.
They're saying that they filed a brief supporting an ACLU suit to stop the Migrant Protection Protocols program, saying that it endangers their lives. And yes, there was an article in today's paper about, guy witnesses a double murder and people have been robbed. I mean, these are migrants, who are waiting. They have a legitimate case to make. Yeah, I need asylum, and you're throwing me back into the shark pit.
That's right.
So these guys, their union represents like 2,500 asylum officers. And they say, this program is, quote, contrary to the moral fiber of our country, unquote, and they're asking the federal court to end it.
Good.
Now, let's hope they do. So far this year, 12,000 people have been sent back to Mexico to wait for their court hearing. And these guys are saying, this policy is forcing us as agents to participate in what they call, quote unquote, widespread violation of international and federal law.
Thank you.
So, Good. It's the American Federation of Government Employees Local 1924. Okay. And God bless them.
God bless them.
So this is like a really unusual rebuke of the Trump administration. Yeah. You don't typically get federal employees banding together and speaking out against
which
some
is
of these
basically
things,
law enforcement, a form of law enforcement.
It
You
is.
usually don't have them talking against the president. So,
Yeah.
Matt, you and I had a hypothetical. I asked you, okay, what happens if they just open up the borders? And
Yeah.
I think that I want to amend that question a little bit,
Yeah.
because I think I know the answer.
We were having a conversation
Yeah.
last night
Yeah.
for our listeners where
Right.
Jim said, well, what if we just opened up the gates?
Yeah, and let people in, because
Yeah.
they would automatically assimilate into the United States. You know that they would pay taxes, they would be working hard, they'd find jobs. That's
Yeah.
what they want.
Yeah.
They want safety and security. But then, of course, the question is, what about terrorists who come in?
Or drug dealers.
Or drug dealers. So
traffickers.
Right. So it's possible, I guess, to process them and send them on. Don't hold them, but process them and send them out.
Well,
and maybe even bus them to a community that they choose.
I would think that that's a much more both moral and ethically fair
And safe.
thing to do.
Yes.
Because so many of these people are fleeing their countries out of desperation
Right.
because
Right.
of things our government and our corporations have
Yes,
done to
that's
their
right.
societies
Yeah,
and their
that's right.
environments.
That's right.
Whether they're putting in hydropower dams or strip mining their minerals or driving them off their agrarian lifestyle by flooding their communities with GMO corn.
Or just gang violence.
And gang violence from corrupt governments that we helped create in the Central American wars under Ronald Reagan.
Right. Thank
Now,
you.
I think it's an interesting question, Jim, because, well, would we be overrun with people? Well, America's a huge place with lots of empty spaces, for
Right,
one thing.
right.
And if you did that at the same time that you actually address some of the base causes
Yeah.
of these people's needs and
Which
desperation.
Obama did by sending
Right.
money down in aid to these countries.
And Trump stopped.
Maybe they didn't, that Trump stopped, that they didn't want to leave their
Right.
homes.
Well, and that's the thing. What I was getting to is that so people might come here. They might come here in large numbers.
Yeah.
There would be maybe a big slug to assimilate that many people. But ultimately, if those people didn't fear for their lives
Right.
and they got legitimate jobs and they worked and saved their money,
Maybe that's what they're
many
looking
of
for.
them would want to go back to their home countries.
Thank you. And this is one of the things that I was pretty surprised to hear this, that farmers in Wisconsin, way up north, they're saying that Trump's threat to really enforce the migration, do a big sweep and throw everybody out, they would ruin the dairy industry, because these migrants, who are originally migrants, the immigrants, they milk the cows, they stir the grain, they do all the work. And
our whole
these
food industry
would collapse.
is largely dependent upon that kind of labor.
Correct. And not just that, but look at housing. Look at the whole thing of, remember from the movie Day Without a Mexican, all yard maintenance, except for your yard, because you do your own, would basically stop.
Yeah, exactly.
So why not allow these people who want jobs, who want security and want safety?
It could hardly be any worse than it is now.
Thank you.
Right?
Right.
I mean, just say, like, you know what? Okay, we effed up your country, and we're sorry, and so we're going to let you in. Yeah, we're going to, you got to have your ID and your name, and we're going to register you, and we want to know where you are and where your families are and who you're staying with, all that stuff, and then say, come on in, let's get to work.
Let's have a path to citizenship.
Yeah.
Let's have a path to get their social security number so they can pay taxes.
And it's not like there's not a ton of stuff that needs to be done in this country with the climate crisis. And look at the infrastructure in the country: the roads, the hospitals, the bridges, the schools. The sewer treatment plants, the water treatment plants. All those things are falling apart, and we need desperately to fix those things. And those things take labor, not just money, but labor too. And if you had that, a huge influx of people that are
wanting to work, willing to work.
Yeah, I mean, let's do it. Why not?
I
think that'd be a great thing. And at some point now, really though, how it's not easy to overcome the corrupt governments in Honduras, El Salvador.
Yeah.
Maybe
that could be step two. Step two,
taking
care of the people.
A parallel path,
okay,
right?
Parallel. Step 1.2, 1.5.
Say, immigrants, you're welcome.
Right.
Now, would there have to be some restraint on that? It would depend on the numbers who showed up.
And also where they ended up. I mean, if it's just in the southern border, that might be overwhelming to those people. They have to fan them out through the whole country.
Or if you got 3 million people from China suddenly, and then you got a couple million from Mexico, South America.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like numbers could be vast. This is a lot of what freaked people out in Europe, when with Syria,
right?
Right. A million here, a million there. It's like adds up
Greece.
pretty quick.
Well, yeah, but also that's a small country, and in Greece it was on a small island, so on Lesbos. So this is like you said,
most of the countries in Europe are much smaller than compared to us. So we definitely have we
have room.
Way more capacity.
So maybe we could say, all right, process them, get name, whatever, and where they're going to go, if they have contacts, and then give them a free bus pass for the whole family to get up there and have somebody waiting for them. Maybe if they don't have family, they could have some social worker to give them housing, to give them a job.
If you take away the usual thinking inside the box, if you take that box away, think of the hundreds of billions and even trillions of dollars we waste on the military. And what? We could be spending that money. The government could be hiring these people to rebuild the roads.
Like a WPA.
Yeah, exactly. There could be all kinds of great federal programs that just serve the society and the populace at large and provide jobs. And this is a great way to stimulate the economy. So the economy that, Trump is always raging about how great it is, as Elizabeth Warren was saying in the debate this past week, it's like, the economy is great if you're a big pharmaceutical company, not so good if you're trying to fulfill a prescription. It's great if you're a Wall Street guy, not so good if you're trying to, cover the rent.
And she said it depends on where you stand, how you look at it. That's
right, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And so, here would be a way to provide jobs, and this would actually be a bottom-up stimulation of the economy, unlike the trickle-down, which we all know is a pack of lies.
So, Matt, this is like the WPA, and this is what happened when the economy was crashed. The government put all these people to work. And everybody, artists, laborers, storytellers.
Libraries were built, schools were built,
yes, but also
hospitals were built.
Documenting, going out and interviewing people, all of this stuff.
Yeah, cultural stuff.
And this is very exciting to me. I think that this might be a wonderful solution. Let's write to somebody.
Yeah, let's get right on that. So what else is going on? I mean, of course, the damage is occurring apace. Sonny Perdue, who's head of the Department of Ag, has been hiding reports done by Department of Ag scientists who have a very sterling reputation for the caliber of their work and the nonpartisanship of it. He's hiding reports that are showing the impacts of climate change and the damages thereof.
Are we surprised?
No, we're not. And he's basically stopped government-funded research into the issue. And the Trump administration won't publish dozens of reports that have already been done by their claimed in-house scientists, who are showing these effects. And he even is trying to move that division to, where was it, Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Closer to the farmers.
Kansas City, Missouri.
Missouri, okay. Yeah. And this is like, it's closer to the farmers who are the beneficiaries of this. And it's like, but you know what? It doesn't matter how close you are if you're not telling them the truth about the impact of the climate.
That's right.
And how that's going to affect what they grow.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And this is crazy. I mean, so some of these reports are saying that, because of global warming and the increase in the heat, rice is going to have fewer vitamins, and the grass-fed cattle is going to be less nutritious. There's going to be, an increasing incidences of allergies, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Sonny Perdue is a climate denier,
of course,
and he has retaliated against scientists whose findings conflict with the administration's stance.
So, this is one of the reasons why he's moving the headquarters to Kansas City.
Right.
And these people who have lived here and worked here for many, many years are up in arms. They don't want to follow, leave their homes, leave their families, leave their schools.
And, this is just another way to say, it's like this information is of daily use to farmers, consumers, researchers, et cetera. And it's just like, we're just not going to have that information anymore. It's like, what do you think? How long do you think you're going to hide that?
That's right, Matt. I mean, eventually what's going to hit the fan.
Yeah, it's not going to be like nature is going to stop doing what it's doing.
Sonny Perdue says it doesn't exist, and it doesn't. All right, I was listening to the radio coming over here, and I heard this disturbing article, notice that says rice farming up to twice as bad for climate change as previously thought, studies reveal.
Oh, yeah.
It's known as a major contributor to climate change, but new research suggests it is a far bigger problem than previously thought. Techniques needed to reduce emissions while also cutting water use may be, in fact, boosting some greenhouse gases, meaning the impact of the rice cultivation may be up to twice as bad as previous estimates suggests.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. That's not what I heard. I was hearing that the nutritional value of rice will be less.
That is what the Department of Ag report did say. Yes.
That's right.
But there's an impact to growing the rice.
And an impact to growing it, yes.
Yeah.
But here it says the main culprit is methane, a potent greenhouse gas emitted from flooded rice fields as bacteria in the waterlogged soil produce it in large quantities.
Yeah.
Wow. So rice is contributing to it, but also rice is less nutritious. And there are many of the Asian countries, this is a main staple, a food staple.
For billions of people.
For billions of people,
so
correct.
We've got some real problems coming down the pike, you know. Now, locally, remember we reported last week that the tangerine turd in the White House has said he was going to...
Twitler.
Yeah, Twitler. He was going to inflict a nationwide sweep to, remove millions of illegal immigrants from the country. Well, now he's saying, well, I'm going to wait for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, what's happened is that that's, inflicted fear and, anxiety in our community and every community. In fact, listeners know I'm part of Accompaniment, which is part of the Rapid Response
Which we
group.
talked about last week, and it's good that we talk about this.
And so the 24-hour hotline that the Rapid Response maintains to report ICE has gotten like 106 calls in just the last few days.
Where is that? Here? In Sonoma County?
In Sonoma County. Now, ICE has not been seen. They have not, when observers have gone to find them, they don't see them. So if they have been here, they flittered in and flittered out. So there have been no documented sightings.
Makes you wonder
them.
whether they're doing it just to have a presence to scare people.
Exactly. And many of us think that is part of the intent, that it's just done to make it more miserable for people here in a racist effort to drive them out of the country, right? So I'm glad that the Rapid Response and the hotline is being used. That's a good sign.
That is a really good sign.
And people are ramping up their efforts to distribute the wallet cards that tell, both in English and Spanish, what your rights are if ICE comes pounding on your door.
Can you give us a contact again for that, Matt? It's important. I know we talked about it last week, but I think it's really important that people who are interested in joining up can do that, and if not, just to be aware of it.
Let's see if I have
it was a yellow card, I think.
Yeah, but I don't. Let's see. Here we go. The 800, the hotline phone number is 707-800-4544. So if anybody sees Homeland Security, Border Patrol, ICE, Immigration Control, call 800-4544. And if you want more information...
Wait, 800, what's the number, 800?
So it's 707. 800.
Yeah.
4544.
Right, and they're identified with jackets that say ICE and then underneath it police.
Well, if you see,
new.
Well, this number is not.
No. The ICE people.
It depends. They don't have any required uniform.
So they could be just like
now,
you
sometimes
and me
it just says.
shirt.
Sometimes they'll have like a windbreaker just has police on the back,
which is
very misleading. Yeah.
Right, it's not. They're not cops.
Yeah. They're not, but they pretend to be, and they fake people out.
And they intimidate
people. Folks,
people.
if you want more information, the website is www.northbayop.org and then /rapid response.
So North Bay Op is all one word?
Yeah, northbayop.org /rapid response. Right. So, but that's another poison in the community. Thanks to Donald Trump and Stephen Miller,
and Stephen Miller,
and their sleazebag bigots that we would love to see float off the face of this earth today.
I'd like to see him in jail. Matt, I found the article. It's actually about rice again. It says it will become less nutritious as carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere rise, potentially jeopardizing the health of billions of people who rely on the crop as their main source of food. Scientists have found that exposing rice to levels of carbon dioxide that are expected in the atmosphere before the end of the century results in the grain containing lower levels of protein, iron, and zinc, as well as reduced levels of a number of B vitamins. Wow. Yeah. So that's a main food crop. Also, the whole thing, back to people coming into our country, that's another thing, Matt. They're talking about because of climate change, climate disaster, climate crisis, that there's going to be major movement of people. And that's going to be another thing that's going to we're going to have to face.
The whole Syrian crisis in large part was caused by extended multi-year droughts.
That's right. And it's happening in India too.
Yeah, we're seeing it. It's happening.
Northern Europe now is under a heat wave. Temperatures over 100 degrees, and they're not used to that?
The ice is melting ever so quickly in the the Greenland ice sheet, and that's going to impact various places. Of course, there's very huge low-lying countries with huge populations like Bangladesh. You know, a few inches rise can start wiping out all kinds of land used to produce food.
Right, and cities in India are losing water.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this says France endures its hottest day ever as Europe swelters in a heat wave. If France hits a record temperature of 45.9 degrees Celsius, so double it. That's 90 plus 30 is 120. 120, and it can't be that high.
Well, it's not quite double.
It's close.
Yeah,
90 plus half of that.
Well, it is close to
120,
probably 110 or something. And that's where in Europe?
This is in France.
In France.
In France. Yeah. And France generally don't have air conditioning because it's basically a temperate climate. Yeah. It's coming up from Africa because it's moving north.
Well, I mean, folks,
not cool.
We here at the Mooks like to remind everybody to keep a look over your shoulder so you know what's coming.
You mean, for not just weather, but also ice?
Yeah.
Everything.
Trump,
anything.
Forewarned is forearmed.
Oh, my God, there we go.
But you're going to need 8 arms in this world.
Yeah, I think so, too, just like Shiva.
Yeah, that's right. Call on the gods to help us.
That's right. Please do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Jim, we've talked about rent control in the past, and the Prop 10 on the last election lost by like 59%.
So what was Prop 10 again?
That was the one that was going to repeal the act that says local communities can't impose rent control on any building built after 1997 or I forget.
That's
something.
A long time ago.
Yeah, really.
And we had some city council candidates talking about rent control and their feelings about it. And you and several candidates got into it because
a little bit. I was pushing people because we need it, and it's obvious. It's even worse another year on down the road. The homelessness and the rental stuff is just really out of control. So this may be back on the ballot in 2020.
And how do you advise people to vote on this?
Well, I'd say vote for rent control. We need to protect our communities, and we can't just keep saying it's okay to raise rents as much as your greedy little heart wants to. There has to be some constraints on that.
How can there be housing available if there is no rent control?
Well, guess what? There is no rent control, and the housing is not available.
Oh, there we go.
Right?
All right.
So, I mean, that's a specious argument made by the California apartment associations and the landlords, corporate landlords, some of whom we've got right here in this town. I know somebody who rents over at The Vineyard, which used to be, the Greenbrier Apartments or something.
Okay, all right.
Eli and Casa Grande, 500 units, and it's like $2,300 for a 2-bedroom crappy apartment. But not only that, in their lease they lard them with all kinds of extra fees and charges, gardener's fees and pool maintenance fees.
You're kidding! And garbage and all utilities.
That don't even include the PG&E utilities, but it's like trash and water, and those end up running for a family of 5. $250 to $300 a year.
That's a lot.
I mean,
of money.
a month.
Yeah.
So you're looking at $2,600 a month.
So rent control would hopefully stabilize it, so people
could address some of that.
Right. So people go in a certain.
It would
price,
actually give the last Prop 10 would actually have given local jurisdictions more control. Now that doesn't mean the local jurisdiction has to exercise its most extreme oversight that it wants, but it could if it wanted. And I'd say that looking at the homeless situation and how brutal this is on people and how many people are close to being homeless because they are so strained financially, it's necessary to I some real rent control here.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm reading about...
And just as a side note, I just wanted to say, though, that lost in part because the California Apartment Association outspent the proponents 3-1.
Oh, my gosh.
There you go. So TV ads and all that.
So speaking of things like that, California is to vote on a partial repeal of a sweeping tax law. That's Prop 13.
Ooh.
I
want to hear more.
It's often referred to as the third rail of California politics. If you touch it, you die. But it's now likely that an effort to significantly roll back Proposition 13, the famed property tax limitation initiative enacted by voters in 1978, will be on the ballot in 2020.
Now, this is the one that's going to address the commercial property.
And it will likely split the political world right down the middle, with huge stakes for commercial property owners and the state and local governments, and particularly the schools that rely on property taxes.
Right.
Prop 13 capped property taxes at 1% of assessed value at time of acquisition and limited upward reassessment of property values to 2% per year so long as the property didn't change hands.
That 2% of the 1%. Let me make that clear.
Okay, good. Thank you. Over time, it has had a profound effect on the entire taxation system in California. Ain't that the truth?
Yep.
And has produced wildly variable property taxes on similar properties depending on how recently they were built or acquired. Vigilant longtime homeowners are the backbone of support for Prop 13, but the system treats residential and commercial real estate exactly the same. And you've been arguing against this for years.
Yep.
So, for years, left-of-center political advocates and policy wonks have dreamed of a reform that would create a split-roll approach where commercial properties would lose Prop 13 protections and be treated for tax purposes like real estate in the rest of the country. Woo-hoo!
Yeah, and I think they're proposing that commercial real estate would be reassessed once every 4 years.
Oh, let's read. Split roll proponents initially considered a drive level. Let's hold on. They've so far they've gotten 860,000 signatures.
Oh, good.
Far more than the 585,000 necessary for certification.
Good sign.
It is. I'm skimming here.
Yeah.
Well,
folks, for listeners, so what's happened is with the commercial real estate, since it's a lot of times it's owned in real estate investment trust, there's partnerships, or you can sell a building, but not over 50% of it. You want to sell your holdings, so you sell 49% of it
49.5%.
1 year, and that does not trigger a reassessment. Somebody else comes along and buys 49.5%. The next year does not trigger a reassessment. If that's you, that's down to 1.5%, 2%. Well, then you sell that. That doesn't trigger, and you're out.
Yeah.
In the meantime, huge commercial property owners like Bank of America have been shifting their fair tax burden onto the residential side of it. So this absolutely has to be split. Yeah. And before Prop 13, commercial property was treated different than residential property. Because they are different. And that's why we have so many potholes.
Yeah, because and also why schools have to have fundraisers,
exactly,
have bake sales to support their music
or
program.
Pass discrete local taxes for particular issues.
So per student funding before 1978 and soon as before it actually went into effect was number 1 in the nation. Yeah. Now it's like number 49th. It doesn't answer that question, but it does say the business community is adamantly opposed, of course, arguing that higher commercial property taxes will just be passed on to consumers, or alternately that another contributor to the high cost of doing business in California will damage the economy and repel investors.
Well, that argument is both baloney, because of course they've been making that about the California economy. Oh, you're driving business, and it continues to grow.
Yes, and the Republican Party is always are ready for a tax fight, while most certainly oppose split roll with gusto, and Democrats could be divided. As with any long pending ballot initiative, there's always the possibility some compromise could be worked out in the interim. It says a USC Los Angeles Times poll earlier this year pegged support for split roll at 54%. Oh. That's not that much. But no one is under the illusion that it's anything like a slam dunk. It could become one of the most expensive California ballot initiative fights ever. That's how much public and private money is at stake.
Oh, it will. Yeah. But that's good to know. So I'm really glad to hear that it's gathering that many signatures, because that's an indicator of support.
And I think that Gavin Newsom was one of the ones who really wanted to have this, and good for him.
Yeah. Well, folks, this is Two Mooks and a Mic, and
it's the end,
this is the end.
This is the end. The last time we say goodbye.
We want to thank our listeners for sticking with us. I hope we didn't ruin you too many lunch hours.
We have a good time for you to take a nap every Friday.
And we want to, our last bit of advice, we need to track the two biggest issues going into 2020 elections.
What's that?
That is voting rights, the protection of the Voting Rights Act, gerrymandering and the voter purges, and fight that everywhere we can.
Yep. And also, where can you get a good donut?
And the climate crisis.
So, but that's donuts too. Donuts to whatever.
And I guess you're going to need that donut if your rice doesn't fill the bill.
Unless you get a rice donut. And also, we just want to give a big shout out to KPCA
and the Petaluma Community Access. The folks here are just great. Thank you, PCA, for letting us have this studio for now a couple of years.
Yeah, our therapy.
Do our
weekly
thing.
Therapy. Yeah, it's a rubber room.
We appreciate it.
So, all right.
Well, we're signing off now, folks. Thanks for listening. Take care.
Bye.